coronavirus pandemic sent oil demand plummeting as global travel was put on hold.
Exxon lost money on operations, and it lost much, much more in write-downs for investments that will never pay off. CEO Darren Woods says the company has always expected the pandemic to be a blow. So I've got my sketch all finished. Here it is, and it's on a piece of tracing paper. And I think I have the positions all figured out for the different kids. And there's a couple of ways that I can transfer it to my watercolor paper. I can enlarge it at a copy center, blow it up, and then transfer it with graphite paper to my watercolor paper, or I can look and try to sketch it right on my watercolor paper. There's two different effects that happen with the two different ways of doing it, and you can make the graphite transfer look nice and free, but there's even an added addition of more freedom if you just sketch it right on your watercolor paper. But you have to have the ability to sketch it, and also you're able to change it a little bit as you go along and adjust the drawing and make it even better than it is on the tracing paper. So I love to do color thumbnails and little value thumbnails that are just tiny, like maybe 2 inches by 1 inch, or just small on my paper. It's kind of like practicing. So I can practice doing the watercolor before I actually get to paint on the finished watercolor. I took a workshop from Charles Reed, and one of the things that he mentioned was don't paint till you know where you're going. And so part of the importance of the color study and the value study is that it kind of lets you know where you're going and what you want to do with your finished watercolor painting. I wanted to use, there's always rules in watercolor painting, and when I first started, people said, never use black, make your own black. But then I've taken other workshops that say, you know, it's okay to use black. So on this this painting, I wanted the children's hair to be just that deep, rich black. So it would stand out kind of design-wise in a, you know, very important way. So that's where I'm going, is just working and looking at my color study and using that as a guide. If I'm putting a wash down, I want to put it down with not hesitancy. I want to put it down with some strength so that it looks like the brush stroke knows where it's going. And that makes a big difference on the finished piece of artwork and how it looks when you're all done with it. So I want to put a little detail on top of the watercolor, but I want to make sure that the watercolor is entirely dry before I put this detail down on top. I'm using a rigger brush, and I want to again paint like I know where I'm going and putting that stroke down with determination. So I'm using a little bit of tracing paper. I want to add some collage to this watercolor. So I need to make a pattern for where I want to cut the collage, so I'm using tracing paper and going over in pencil exactly where I want the piece of collage to come down on the watercolor paper. It will add a little texture and detail that I'm going to like. So now I've got my pattern on the paper, and I've aligned it so I want the stripes to go a certain way, so it looks kind of like a nice pillow in the background. So I'm just using that pattern and cutting it out with scissors, making sure that I follow the pattern close enough so that I don't leave any gaps. I'm making sure that my watercolor is dry, then placing the paper over the spot where I want to put it and making sure it fits right. And then I'm going to put some acrylic medium on the back. Make sure I cover it, and I want to do this quickly so that it's still wet when I transfer it to the watercolor paper, and then make sure it's in the right spot. Get it all pushed down, make sure all the air bubbles are out of it, and then flatten it out nicely, and there I have my first pillow. So there's a lot of things to think about when you're doing a watercolor. Yeah, think about design, you think about the color, you think about the quality of paint, and how you're putting the brush strokes on the paper. You also have to think about the painting and the story. So I've got a bunch of puppies and children, and both puppies and children have a certain particular smell about them. You've got that nice brand new puppy smell, and you've got the smell of those nice, clean, very soft pajamas on the children. So you want to think about those things and just kind of get into the painting. You want to feel how it feels to have that puppy lay on your head, and how it feels to lay on top of that puppy. I got the idea for this painting. I had my sketchbook, and I had a son that had one of his dogs over visiting, and he was laying on the couch, the son, and the dog just laid on his head and got quite comfortable, and so that was the first spark of this painting here. We had 2 toddlers years ago. They were probably about 4 and 2 and years old, and they would play out in our front yard, and as soon as they were out in the front yard playing, the neighbor's dog would start running across the road to join them in the front yard. But it would absolutely freak out the 2 boys, and they would run screaming to the front porch and run inside, afraid of this dog that was maybe 2 inches high. So we thought, maybe it's time that we got a dog. So we bought a cute little tiny Malamute puppy. We had no clue that when spring came, the dog would instantly drop a carpet's worth of hair onto the floor daily. But one thing, when you have a little teeny tiny puppy and it grows daily and you don't notice how big it's getting, you're not afraid of a 2-inch high dog anymore, because your dog is about 4 feet high. And so it has an effect on, you learn how to take care of an animal, how to love an animal, and it becomes a good thing. It was, so the Malamute was called Kodiak, and we called it Cody. And it was a great dog for boys. We bought a harness for it, and were able to take it down on the dirt road and hook it to a sled and pull the boys down the road. You did have to run next to the dog to get him to pull the sled, but then we weren't able to train him to gee and haw. But good opportunity for the boys to be around dogs and animals. So there comes a time in every painting where you look at the painting, you quit looking at your color study or the scrap you're looking at or your value study, and you just kind of take a look and see what your painting needs. Seemed to me that the background needed a little more value, and I could glaze over the background again to add that value, but I thought I would use my atomizer, and so I made a mask out of tracing paper, cut it out so I could protect the area that was already painted with the watercolor, where I didn't want it to get any spatters on it. And I could put it over the watercolor painting and then go ahead and spray with my atomizer. I used a value that was just a little bit darker than the background so that it would be pretty subtle, but it added just the right touch to the painting. I secured the tracing paper down with some tape and masking tape, and then just went ahead and sprayed. At the end, I'm putting some acrylic medium over the painting so that I can hang it without glass. If you put your nose right up next to your screen and take a nice big breath and breathe in, you can almost smell that brand new puppy smell and the smell of those nice clean little pajamas on those children. So hope you enjoyed this video and enjoyed watching me make puppy dreams. Thanks for watching.